Good evening, everyone. We are now in Joshua chapter 7. Now, Joshua chapter 7 actually connects to Joshua chapter 6 as an incident that is post victory of the city of Jericho, right? The city of Jericho, and we find that the Israelites were victorious. But chapter 7 comes to haunt the Israelites. And before we start chapter 7, I like to take us back to chapter 6 and in verse 18, right? And let that be our background. Right here in verse 17, let's look at verse 17 as it begins. It says, "Now the city shall be doomed to destruction." This is one word, right? Doomed to destruction is literally called harem. It is, how should we say? It is devoted. The word actually means devoted, right? But it is devoted to a positive thing or a negative thing. And so in this case, this is a negative thing. And so the idea of devoted here would mean that it is sealed to destruction. And so the word doomed in English is a fairly good representation. So harem is devoted either for God or devoted for destruction. And so they are told very specifically the city is doomed to destruction. All who are in it. And verse 18 is something which relates to chapter 7. And by all means, abstain. The word abstain means abstain from. I think that would be the two words here. Abstain from is to keep or guard from the accursed. Now, this word accursed, again, it means harem. And we have one here, right? And now we have another one here. And then you see this accursed things, lest you become accursed. To become accursed means to be harem. This is the third time. When you take of the accursed things, and this is also harem. And so this is actually a play of words. And then after that, you make the camp of Israel a harem. And here we have, it's all about harem. And then you find in verse 19, it says all the silver, gold, bronze, and iron, and they are consecrated to the Lord. And this is not harem. And this one means make kadosh, make holy, set apart. Now, the reason why I wanted to bring you all back to this segment of chapter 6 is that, remember yesterday I had mentioned to you, this God's warfare has to be fought by God's strategy, God's rules. Although it may look really silly to some people, it is to follow what exactly God says. And here we find that this play of word by the word harem is to tell them that the entire city is harem. And they are not to take anything that is harem. And if they do take it, they become harem. And that's the whole play. It is play of this particular word harem, such that the Israelites do not become like the people of Jericho. And then there are certain things that, like silver, gold, bronze, and iron, are to be set apart for God. That is the background. And so when we get to chapter 7, it begins this narrative. They see another, another town. But the children of Israel, it seems that they had committed a trespass. And in this case, trespass means they were unfaithful, right? They committed, and this word, committing a trespass is something unfaithful, something treacherous. Basically, what it really means is that they've done something wrong, but they pretended that it's okay. That is what this picture of the trespass here means, right? This is a word by the word ma'al, right? And it is with regards to the accursed things. What are the accursed things? The harem. Remember, just now we saw that? The harem, things that were dedicated to be destroyed by God. And they are not supposed to take. But we have Achan, right? Achan, and remember, this name is Achan. This is not a Chinese name, not Achan, it's Achan, the son of Karmi, all right? The son of Zavdi, the son of Zerah, and of the tribe of Yehudah. And this is important. Why is all this thing traced? Because they need to know exactly who did it. So when he says the children of Israel, this is the overall picture. In God's eyes, when one of them has done it, it affects the entire nation. And so this particular person who has taken the harem things, it is Achan. And he is from the tribe of Judah. And so clearly it says that he has taken the things that is harem. And remember what God said, if you take any of the harem things, then you will be harem and God will destroy you. Just like God destroying the people in Jericho. And so the anger of the Lord burned against the children of Israel. Now you may have to think hard, because the one who took the harem things is not all the children of Israel, it is Achan. Achan, right? It's one man. But God is going to hold the entire nation responsible because they live one for all and all for one. That's the nation under God. And so now Joshua sent men from Jericho to a place called Ai, which is besides Beth Aven on the east side of Bethel. And you must remember, Bethel is a very important place where Jacob saw the ladder, and it's important to the early patriarchs. And so this is Ai, which is actually north of Jericho. He says, go spy out the country. So it says here, go up. And so understand, go up means ascend. And this means that it will look like this. This would be Jericho. And Ai is actually uphill. So that's why it says go up. And so the men went and spied out Ai. And when they returned to Joshua and said to him, well, don't let all the people go up. You know, it's not a big deal. Let about 2,000 or 3,000 men go up and then attack Ai. So don't trouble. The word in verse 3 is don't cause them to be weary, or don't trouble, right? Don't trouble everyone. They had a fairly large army, remember? Don't trouble all the people here, which are the armies, right? Don't tire them. No, it's a small game. It's like, when you're playing a tournament, this is not a big enemy, right? For the people of Ai are few. And so the idea here in verse 3 is that they are little, as in number. And so they think that if they are few in number, so you don't have to worry too much about it. And so about 3,000 men of Israel went up from Jericho, from the people, but they fled before the men of Ai. The word fled before means to the face. And so when they met with the men of Ai, they ran away. And the men of Ai struck down about 36 men, for they had chased them from before the gate. This would mean that before the gate of Ai, as far as Shavarim, and struck them down on the descent, means on the way coming down, right? On the way down. And therefore the hearts of the people melted and became like water. Now, this state of affair, the heart of the people, would literally means their heart is pounding. They have no more confidence. That's what it means. It is an idiom. No more confidence. And what do you see? You see an A and a B, right? The hearts of the people melted, became like water. So you have an A and a B. Basically, it is an emphasis that they are just like the kings of the land of Canaan, when they heard that Joshua and the Israelites crossed the Jordan River and it had dried up for them. Wow, they just couldn't stand this. Now, in turn, in this particular episode of Ai, the 3,000 men, now you notice 3,000 men who went up, right? 3,000 men who went up to Ai, got 36 men killed, and they were chased away by a city that they say that, well, they only have a few in number. And so what happened? This is actually, at the end of the day, when you finish reading up to verse 5, you must realize that this has become an embarrassment. It is I guess more than an embarrassment, it is a humiliation. When they had routed the city of Jericho, they lost to a very small city and using a fairly large number of men. And what happened? And this is the question they are asking themselves. And so in verse 6, then Joshua tore his clothes, fell to the earth, face before the ark of the Lord until evening. He, the elders of Israel, put dust on their heads. And so you need to understand that tearing clothes, falling to the earth, and in this case, in verse 6, this would be the Adamah, actually the soil, right? And his face before the ark of the Lord until evening, both Joshua and the elders of Israel. And then thirdly, they put dust on their head. So understand this: 1, 2, and 3. These are signs or symbols of humility and mourning. And basically, it is a response that they have been completely demolished and they are angry. Something like this has happened and they don't know what happened. They are before God seeking his face. They are putting dust on their heads as a sign of mourning. And basically, they are asking God. And so this is what Joshua said. He says, alas, right? Lord God. Now understand this word, Lord God, is Adonai Yehovah. This is what it means. This is Adonai Yehovah. Now, in some of your translations, you would find, for example, the NIV, they have used the word sovereign God. And whatever else, I'm just giving you the Hebrew terminology here. The Hebrew terminology right now is Adonai Yehovah. That's it. So any word like sovereign and all the likes are just a translator's in introduction into the text itself. There is no such Hebrew word called sovereign in the Bible, but you do find that in the English. And the question is, why have you brought this people over the Jordan at all? To deliver us into the hands of the Amorite to destroy us? And this is a question that is in the minds of Joshua. Now remember, Joshua didn't go into battle. He sent 3,000 men. Now, in principle, he is supposed to have gone because he has to be ahead of them. But his question is, why did they lose this battle? Because this battle was not discussed with God. And so now he is frustrated. He says, had we been content to dwell on the other side of the Jordan, which is the east, we could have just stayed there and we won't be dying here. So how, Lord? And I understand this word Lord is not Jehovah. This word Lord is Adonai. Right? Adonai. And what shall I say when Israel turns its back before its enemies? Do you know what it means to turn its back? Now, the idea here when it says turn its back is to, well, I guess you could say that they turn and their back is facing. The back is facing the enemy. And this is a very bad idiom in the sense that a back facing the enemy means you're running away. And then it says, for the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land will hear this. This is humiliating, and they will surround us and they will cut off our name from the earth. These are also idioms. Now understand this idiom. The word cut off is karat, meaning what they will do is they will come after the Israelites, and soon enough, the Israelites' name will not be remembered again. And God was telling them when they go in, they will have to eliminate the name of the Canaanites. And now Joshua is saying, oh, the opposite is going to be true. And then, what will you do with your great name? Now notice, Joshua is able to discuss with God in a way where Moses discussed with God. It says, God, Israel, in this case, your children, us, is related to your great name. If our name is cut off, your great name is also gone. So Israel and God is interlinked or intertwined. And Joshua knows that very well. And so Joshua presents this problem in the face of God. And now God says, so the Lord said to Joshua, get up. Why do you lie like this on your face? And so the idea here is to sit up and talk. And the idea here is don't just lie there, right? This is not something that can go away. The problem that has happened with them running away from I has to do with their sin. Now, understand this. Israel has sinned. And so God declares this. And the word sin is our common word, khatat, right? Khatat. Khatat means to miss. They have missed what I told them to do. And see, God told them to do 1, 2, 3. What they did was they did 1, maybe 2, but they missed 3. And so that is why it's called a sin or a khatat, that Israel had missed my instructions. I gave them 5 instructions, they did 4. Now, in our modern day exam, right? If you don't answer 10 questions correctly and you get 9 correct, you still get an A. But in the eyes of God, and if God gives you 10 instructions and you only did 9, in the eyes of God, it is called sin. There is no A given. There's no reward given. This is something which we have to be very, very clear. It says, you have also transgressed my covenant, which I commanded them. Now understand that covenant is a berit, right? An agreement. And this word transgress is not your usual word transgress. This word means to pass over. You have sinned, you have missed what my covenant is that I have commanded you. So what did God did a covenant with them? See, covenants is to do with relationships. God doesn't make a covenant with Canaan. God doesn't make a covenant with the Amorites, but God makes a covenant with Israel because there is a relationship between God and Israel. Now, in this relationship between God and Israel, God, just now we've read in chapter 6, God gave this covenant saying, this is what you must do. This is our agreement. If you follow this, I will give Jericho into your hands, and I will continue fighting with you. And people will hear that and they will tremble. Well, you missed. That is the word sin. You passed over my covenant. You have ignored or avoided doing some of the requirements in our agreement. And for they have even taken some of the accursed things, the haram, and which is very clearly, do not take. And both have stolen and deceived. Now look at these words. The word stolen in this case means to take by stealth. Means you have taken, but people didn't know, right? You have taken by stealth. The second word here is deceived. The word deceived here is to be deceptive, right? To how else would you say? To lie. Well, this is that word lie, right? You have said something that is untrue, and understand this, in the Hebrew concept, when you say something that is untrue and it causes grievance and death, that is a judgment that has to be imposed. So this is not the Rahab or the Rahab type of deception. The Rahab type of deception is not called deception. It is called protection in the eyes of God. In this case, when they took the haram things and kept quiet and pretended nothing happened, that in the eyes of God is deception, and that will be punished. And then they said they have also put it among their own stuff. Now remember in Exodus chapter 19, they are a holy nation. And if they are a holy nation, they have cleansed themselves, they have set themselves apart, they are special among the nation. how is it that you can actually take the haram things and park it with your own things? How can then you worship Jehovah and then go and worship idols? That is a kind of mixture. And in God's eyes, you can't do that. This is called sin, but it is not sin in our modern day language. It is sin in the eyes of God when God said 5 things, you did only 4. And when you overlooked or you transgressed, that is a serious affair because it involves haram things. And in this case, you notice there is no atonement. God never offered an atonement. And so for your understanding of atonement, I would encourage you to go back and study Leviticus chapters 1 to 7. And so it says, therefore, the children of Israel could not stand before their enemies. They cannot face their enemies. So stand means you are standing firm on your ground. The word stand is a typical word of arise, right? Arise means to go against your enemies. You can't. Why? Because God is not with you. And so you have to turn their backs. And turning the backs is an idiom that you're going to run away. So you're running away. And this is no good. Before their enemies, because they have become doomed to destruction. Remember what we have seen in chapter 6? Doomed to destruction. Doomed to destruction means haram. Just as Jericho was haram, doomed to destruction, God says, if you miss what I'm telling you, you are also going to be cursed or haram, doomed to destruction. So what? God is a just God. Just because Jericho does it and they are haram, God says, Israel, if you do it, you are also haram. You do not listen to my words, you will die. And so neither will I be with you anymore unless you destroy the haram from among you. And so what is the solution to God's anger? The solution to God's anger is to destroy. To destroy. And this word destroy here literally means to exterminate. All right, which means that there is a immediate execution from among you. And God says, I don't want to see anything haram amongst you. So you get up, you sanctify the people. And the word sanctify means you make holy the people once again. And say, sanctify yourselves tomorrow. For thus says the Lord God of Israel, there is a haram thing in your midst. And so to sanctify means you got to go and set yourself apart. You've got to clean yourselves. You've got to make yourself special again in the eyes of God, because there is something haram in your midst. And so God knows. O Israel, you cannot stand before your enemies until you take away the haram thing from among you. So what is the solution of this problem? You need to take away. You need to destroy. Right? And this is exactly what they have to do. So in the eyes of God, God is just. God told them that if you do that, you'll be cursed and God's anger will be upon you. And the way to clear God's anger is God's way. And what is God's way? You need to utterly destroy this that is haram among you. So what is this? Verse 14. In the morning. In the morning doesn't really mean in the morning. In the morning literally means as it approached, right? As it approached light. I think that would be a good expression. That the darkness is now slowly becoming bright. So as it become bright, therefore you shall bring everything according to your tribes. And it shall be that the tribe which the Lord takes. What do you mean the Lord takes? The word takes here literally means to seize, to capture. So God is going to go through the 12 tribes and sort this out. And they shall come according to families, and the family which the Lord takes, same, shall come by the households. The household which the Lord takes shall come man by man. And God says, he who sins, he shall die. Understand that this is a judgment of Ezekiel 18. The soul that sins, he shall die. Then it shall be that he who is taken with the accursed thing shall be burned with fire, he and all that he has, because he has transgressed. This is in verse 15. He has passed over the berit of the Lord, and because he has done a disgraceful thing in Israel. What do you mean disgraceful? Disgraceful means a profane thing, right? A crime, something wicked. And that is important for us to understand. In God's eyes, this word disgraceful has a very strong connotation that you have embarrassed God. That is what it means. It's a disgraceful thing. You are making people think that God doesn't exist. You are making people think that God has done something wrong. And that has given an embarrassment. So this person has done an embarrassing thing in Israel, causing God to be angry. And in the result of God's anger, has made Israel a sign of humiliation. And so the harem thing shall be burned with fire. He, the person, and all that he owns. This is important. He and all that he owns, because he has passed over. He has disregarded the agreement of God. And now look at the judgment of God. Joshua rose early in the morning, brought Israel by the tribes, and the tribe of Judah was taken. Now, how did God seize? Now, there must be some supernatural way. It could be by lots, right? That is a thinking here, right? The Umim and Turim, the two rocks, to decide, and there must be some way that Joshua now has seen that God has picked Judah, and God is now visually, vividly expending his judgment, so that everyone in Israel can see the justice of God, the mishpat of God. And now he says he brought the clan of Judah, and he took the family of the Zacharites. He brought the family of the Zacharites man by man, and then Zavdi was taken. And then from Zavdi's household, man by man, and then Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zavdi, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, he was shown by God. Understand that this is a supernatural, right? Supernatural indication. And this is a very long story that's cut short. And this here, you can see that God is with Joshua to execute judgment, to identify the culprit. And in verse 19, Joshua said to Achan, my son, I beg you. Now understand, in verse 19, the word beg you. I guess it is not exactly begging. I think it is more to plead with him, to put to him. I am putting to you this issue, right? You must give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel, and then you must confess to him. And now you tell me what you have done and do not hide from me. And so basically, what does this mean? You must give glory to God, the God of Israel, because God has supernaturally sought him out. All right. So Achan was pointed out by God. And so make a confession. Now, the word confession here literally means well, you should adore God, right? Adore God. You should well, I guess the word here may be used as a confession of the sin, but to make it directed to God, right? To Jehovah. And now you tell me, report, explain to me what you have done, all right? And do not conceal it from me. And so this is now the judgment in process. And this judgment is actually by God. That Achan answered Joshua saying, yes, indeed, I have sinned against the Lord God of Israel. And this is what I have done. And look here, confession. And this confession is to appease God's anger. And he admits that he has sinned. He has actually missed. Only he and he alone. When I saw among the spoils a beautiful Babylonian garment, it appears that this Babylonian garment is a royal garment of the king of Babylon whenever he goes to the land of Canaan I guess you can say for holidays. And that's the idea here. Babylonian garments are not readily found. And if it's found, it's usually a royal garment and a royal robe. So by implication, Jericho and Babylon are very closely knitted and related. And he says, well, I saw this garment. I don't think it was going to go to waste, right? I took 200 shekels of silver. Remember, shekel is a weight of precious things, right? Silver, a wedge of gold weighing 50 shekels, a lot of them. And in verse 21, he says, I coveted them. The word covet merely means take pleasure. Take pleasure. I liked it, right? I desired them. Is it wrong to desire? Well, only when it is going against what God tells you to, right? As human nature, we do desire things, right? But you don't desire it with the intent of doing something that is criminal or something that is morally wrong or something that is against God, and in this case, sin, that you avoid compliance to God's berit. And I took them. You notice all these words? I coveted and took them. That is A and B. If you don't covet, you won't take. And these are the words. By emphasis, you can actually see the Hebrew language is very action-oriented. So the covet here is not merely an internal desire, it is an external desire that you can see by taking it, right? And the taking of it is the wrong thing because God says, don't take. Guard yourselves from taking anything that is haram. Well, there they are. I have concealed it in the land, in the arets, in the land. And this is part of the promised land, right? In the middle, right? In the middle of my tent. And it means it's part of them. The silver under it. So you have the tent. And then what do you have? You have the gold and then the silver. And it's all part and parcel of this one household, right? And this is Achan. And so God says, this is what you need to do. Make sure that there is evidence and that the judgment is clear and fair. So look at verse 22. And this is what happened. In verse 22, Joshua sent messengers, ran to the tent, and there it was, hidden in his tent, the silver underneath it. Three things, right? Three things. What do you have? You have Achan of Zerah, silver, gold, and garment. This is what he has. This is what he has taken. And then the judgment requires his sons, right? Let me use a different color here so that you understand. His sons, his daughters, his oxen, his donkeys, his sheep, his tent, and all that he had. And they brought them to the Valley of Accor. This is the important thing. The place is called Accor, and it is a play of the name of Achan, right? Accor is the name of the valley, which is named after Achan. And basically, you would see that the word Accor means trouble. Trouble. And now Achan is trouble. And Joshua said, why have you troubled us? In verse 24, the word here is Accor, right? Why have you Accor us? This is the valley of trouble. And God had already said, if you do that, you will be haram and you will be Accor. And so look at what happened in the judgment. The Lord will Accor you this day. And that's the word trouble, right? And it is with regards to Achan. It's important. It's Achan. Achan comes from the same root as Accor. And so even in the narrative, the Hebrew narrative gives us names which are related to the events. And so you remember what I had said about names, right? Shem. Shem is a name. It defines the character. It is a memorial of what happened. So whenever you hear the word Achan or the Valley of Accor, you know that Accor has come upon Israel and Accor has come upon Achan. And God is going to Achan you this day, today. And what is this judgment? Verse 25 says that all Israel, understand, all Israel is 12 tribes. Do not think that this is 1.5 million people all taking up one piece of stone and throwing at him, right? It is a representation of 12 tribes. And they picked up stones to stone him. And so the word stone him is ragam. And the word ragam literally means to fling a stone, right? To fling a stone. And the thing that they are flinging here is the Evan. The idea here is the Evan. And these are rocks. And this is, understand this, the stoning is him, Achan. And then they burn them with fire after they had stoned them with stones. Now, I would think, and many commentaries agree with this view as well. And this view is this: in the justice of God in this particular case, is that the soul that sins, it shall die. I think you can read it in Ezekiel chapter 18. Ezekiel 18 and in verse 4. And it says this: behold, all souls are mine. The soul of the Father as well as the soul of the Son is mine. Which means that Achan and his sons are all belonging to God. And then in Ezekiel 18:4, in the final phrase, God says, the soul who sins shall die. Now, given this backdrop of Ezekiel 18, and now we come back to Joshua chapter 7, I want us now to take a look and be very clear of this. The idea of the sons and his daughters are clear from Ezekiel 18 verse 4 that it has nothing to do with them. And so what did they stone? They stoned them with stones and burned them after they had stoned them. And so I would think that these would be the oxen, donkeys, and sheep. And after they had died, Achan, oxen, donkeys, sheep, and the tent and every possession he has were burned with fire. That is what I would read in this passage. And the sons and daughters would be the witness to this account, to understand how God invokes justice, that the sin of the father doesn't pass to the sons. The soul who sins shall die. And this would be what I have also gleaned from the Jewish commentators as well. And it's important because they would see this as a mishpat, a judgment of God. And then they raised over him. And so this would be a possible key. Only him. And so not the whole family, but only one person. A great heap of stones as a memorial, still there to this day. And so the Lord turned from the fierceness of his anger. And so God's anger is now appeased. That is what it means. And in verse 26, the word turn is shuv. You should know this word by now. It is returning to the original state. The original state of God's emotional state is peaceful. It is happy, right? That's our normal peace state. But when you turn to fierceness of anger, it's because of the harem of the sin that Achan did. And now that the judgment has been completed, Achan has died. The judgment has been executed to the letter by the Israelites of all Israel. Notice, all Israel. Stone him, not the sons and daughters. Therefore, the name of that place has been called the Valley of Accor to this day. And remember, Accor means trouble. Because this day trouble came upon the Israelites because 36 of them died. Because God was angry. God did not fight for the Israelites when they went against Ai. And because of that, God says, you must make yourself holy. How do you make yourself holy? By removing the sin from amongst you. And so in this chapter, we have seen that there is no provision of atonement for Achan, because the soul who sins shall die. And in this particular case, God is so angry with Israel because Israel was not aware that this has happened to them. And when this is weeded out, that means that they have to deal with the sin. And God tells you, you must deal with the sin. If you refuse to execute judgment, then the sin will be upon the entire nation. And so we have this very importantly, all right, that you find that Achan was stoned, and they burned them after they had stoned them. And in this case, the them would be the oxen, donkeys, sheep, and these are the ones who are alive, not the sons and daughters. The sons and daughters were there just to witness. And the next indicator is this: they raised over him a great heap of stones, not them. Him, Achan, as a memorial. So the rest didn't die. So you don't have a memorial for oxen and donkeys and sheep anyways. And so, but they were living things and they were stoned because they all belonged to Achan. But his progeny continues, because God says in Ezekiel 18 verse 4, the soul who sins shall die. And so in this case, judgment was executed, and God toned down his anger to become appeased and happy again. And thereby, the Valley of Accor is for them to remember, do not tempt God, because if you do, bad things are going to happen. And with this, we come to the end of chapter 7.